I got these going right across my deck here now. I did not right up in his vicinity, but no, I didn't. So this is good too, Roger. Thanks for that information, sir, and I'll get back to you if we come up with anything. Over.
Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name is Taylor, and joining me right now will be Tanner. Tanner, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I am warmed up because we already recorded an episode earlier today.
We did. Dare I say to tease it, we may have read one of the most ridiculous movie reviews that exists in this world.
We did. So when you listen to the bonus on the Russian film Icebreaker, about an icebreaker in the Antarctic, listen through the end and you'll get to hear some movie reviews. Probably my favorite movie review I've ever read.
And if you're listening to this and wondering, hey, how do I get to that sweet, awesome bonus content? You can sign up on our Patreon at patreon.com/beyondthebreakers. Feel free to do that. We like it when you do that.
There are two levels. You can sign up for $3 a month at the Able C Person tier. You get, theoretically at least, one bonus episode a month. We're a little behind on that right now. There's also the $5 tier, the Second Mate tier, where you get the $3 bonus plus an additional bonus. So yeah, it's a good time. We have some good stuff over there. If you're on the Patreon, even as a free member, you still have access to the Discord. We have some good stuff over there. It's not the most hopping Discord, but we have some good loyal Discordants who have some interesting stuff posted there.
Discordites. Yeah, it's a good time. You should check it out. Patreon.com/beyondthebreakers. With that out of the way, what have you been up to?
Let's see. Aside from watching the film Icebreaker, I've been doing some reading. We did finish DTF St. Louis. It's very good.
Nice.
But I mentioned on our last main episode, I had mentioned watching that Nat Geo special Secrets of the Bees. And so that got me, that sort of aligned with and further triggered an interest in insects in general, but also Hymenoptera. So like ants, bees, wasps, stuff like that. So I am reading a book called Endless Forms, The Secret World of Wasps by Sarian Sumner.
Interesting.
She's like an ecologist, an entomologist. And the book is an exploration of the diversity of wasps around the world and how they have historically gotten such a bad reputation.
She's a wasp apologist.
Yes. So particularly in contrast to bees, which, bees are seen as useful and productive, even though, yes, they can sting. Kind of the first part is looking at that general consensus that, if you ask someone to describe bees, they'll probably mention the fact that they can sting, but they'll also mention the fact that, they make honey, they pollinate flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with wasps, people are at much more of a loss to say, what do they actually do besides attack?
I was going to say, sting you for no reason, generally.
And no creature would exist if it didn't actually provide anything or do anything for its environment. So the book is sort of devoted to looking at these different types of wasps. There's thousands and thousands of varieties of wasps, and they're always discovering more. Insects are just kind of like that. And wasps are also looked at sort of as a window of evolutionary history, particularly among Hymenoptera, sort of looking at how, bees, the common ancestor of bees and wasps and ants would have been something more akin to a wasp than any of the others. Bees being basically wasps that went vegetarian, got a little thicker in the middle.
That's funny.
Ants basically being wasps that have largely lost their ability to fly, but ants still do have some nasty bites that they can give out. So just kind of looking at that and how diverse and interesting and beneficial wasps are to the global environment. They're very useful. They do some pollination, not obviously as much as bees do. They're useful in pest control because they're predatory, and they they predate on a lot of the things that farmers would like to keep off of their crops, like caterpillars.
Interesting.
I think the most interesting thing I've picked up so far is the fact that Darwin studied wasps a lot, and they actually partially contributed to Darwin basically not really seeing a space for an intelligent creator in the animal world, specifically the tarantula hawk wasp. Are you familiar with those?
I've heard of it.
Those are the ones that sting tarantulas. They have an extremely painful sting, even for humans.
Mm-hmm.
They sting tarantulas, they drag them to like their nest, and they plant their eggs inside so that when the eggs hatch, they have living food to feed on.
Yeah.
With this numbed, paralyzed tarantula. And Darwin basically saying, there's no way that a god would design something like this.
Right. Like you wouldn't pick this as the option.
There's no way that this is something that someone would choose to do to a living creature. So there's probably no god. So it is funny to see an animal with that kind of power.
Yeah.
To shape a worldview like that. That's sort of like the far end of the horror spectrum for wasps, and most of them are nothing like that. Some of them can't sting at all. So yeah, it has been a really interesting read, in this sort of time when I'm very interested in that sort of thing.
Cool.
In a sense, I get really interested in nature and insects and stuff when, I don't know, it feels kind of the same gap that like fantasy and science fiction does, because it's like there's a lot of crazy, cool, insane stuff that actually exists on Earth.
Yeah, a completely different world.
When you want that sort of like a little like an element of escapism, those things are there also to be explored. So yeah, it's been fun.
I think outer space occupies some of that for me. Sometimes when I want to like just kind of like have your mind blown at like true things. It's
like deep history, like evolutionary history, outer space, all those things where it kind of puts things in perspective for you of like, I'm a small piece of the vast history of the universe. So maybe like my problems aren't really that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yep. It is always fun to go down those rabbit holes.
What have you been up to?
Oh, let's see. I got back into Civilization 5. I think it's probably my favorite Civ game.
That's one I don't think I've played. I have a very spotty history with the Civilization games. I love them, but I just don't really keep up with them much.
4 is the one that's narrated by Leonard Nimoy, I believe. So that one is like the classic one for me as far as Civ goes. But I think 5 like has some like advancements and stuff in it, and then 6 is fun, but I don't know. I just think 5, like Civilization games, like they're a struggle to finish because I feel like at a certain point you burn out and you just want to start over. I feel like 5 has just enough to keep me going without it being too much.
Are you saying that the end of history isn't a real thing?
Yeah, apparently not.
Mr. Fukuyama?
Currently, I'm pretty deep into a game with the Aztecs. I've been trying to like play with different civs that I wouldn't normally play with. And like one of their cool things is you gain culture for your empire by killing enemy units. So that's fun.
I think lots of civilizations do that.
They're the ones who get credit for it in the game. But yeah, it's been fun. I mean, that's one of those games where you can lose hours to stuff like that.
That's probably the worst game in terms of falling into just the one more turn trap.
Absolutely. Like I would love to know how many cumulative hours I have across the Civilization ecosphere, including Call to Power, which I also bought recently.
That's a good one. I still love that game.
Other than Civ, I was happy that Bob's Burgers is back. It's the second half, like the back half of season 16. So
wow, 16 seasons,
right? Like it, and I didn't even start watching it until a couple of years ago. It's kind of a late comer to it, but obviously any show that's gone on for that long, like it's going to vary a little bit episode to episode, and like they're not all going to be 10s, but they actually have done a pretty good job of keeping it fun and new. And I think this current season's been pretty strong. It's it's kind of fun to have a show like that. The show's like just enough that I feel like good watching it with the kids and stuff, but it doesn't feel. I think it's very similar. Like I've heard people compare it to like where King of the Hill falls. So like at the end of the day, no matter how outlandish some of it is and like all that, like everyone's there because they care about each other. It's a pretty decent like family show, actually.
Does Rooney want out?
Rooney doesn't know what she wants. She's laid down now. We'll see. I'm so glad that she could be here for that.
I saw a thing. I don't watch The Simpsons, but I think I've maybe seen one full episode of The Simpsons.
I don't know that I've ever actually sat and watched an episode of The Simpsons.
It's not that I don't think it's funny. There's just so much of it, and I just have never really sat down to check it out.
I think also like by the time I could, I just didn't really want to.
But someone pointed out that The Simpsons has been on TV for so long that in one of the early seasons, it was plausible that Bart was doing yard work for the sister of a World War I veteran. Because it was like, the late 80s? So that would have been a plausible thing to do.
I mean, it's essentially, I think it's been on the air basically as long as I've been alive, which is pretty crazy. But I think it's weird that a show like Bob's Burgers is 16 seasons like that.
Yeah, I would have guessed maybe Bob's Burgers was like 10 years old.
I think as far as like adult quote unquote animation goes, like that's probably my top runner. It's pretty good. I guess we'll talk about a shipwreck now. We've done all the other stuff. We gotta do the thing that we're here to do. The thing that people can skip ahead towards. They keep, plus 30. It's always fun. Today, we are going to talk about the Hermes. Are you familiar with the Hermes?
I'm familiar with Hermes.
Would you like to share who Hermes is?
Hermes is the Greek god of, he's a god of a lot of things, but he's like, I feel like most traditionally portrayed as like a messenger.
Mm-hmm.
He does also do he does also do his share of fighting and killing, though. He does some badass stuff as well.
So if you were going to like send a message projecting power,
I would probably use Hermes.
World War I and World War II, what kind of ship would you build and call Hermes? So you wanted to deliver something to someone. That
message of power, I would probably have to go with an aircraft carrier, just because they're unsinkable.
At this point, airplanes can't sink ships, really. So the Hermes is actually the first vessel designed as an aircraft carrier. Put a little asterisk next to that. There's a bunch of caveats like about what the first aircraft carrier is, but she is the first vessel to like be put pen to paper. This is going to be an aircraft carrier, not a converted something else. Right. She is not the first aircraft carrier. That would be the USS Langley. She was launched before the Hermes, but she's converted from the Collier USS Jupiter. And then the Japanese have the Hosho, which was just launched before the Hermes. She is actually designed as a aircraft carrier. The Japanese just build her far more quickly. We'll kind of get into some of the Hermes delays. Hosho, I'm looking at a picture, looks like a total piece of shit. Like all these early aircraft carriers do, I get that. This looks janky as hell. Yeah, early aircraft carriers are scary. These early ones, so like I'm looking at the Hosho. Mm-hmm. It looks very clearly like it can carry aircraft. Can it launch them? Yeah. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like there's enough space. Well, I think a lot of these are like biplanes. So they don't go that fast anyway. So you put that thing into the wind and you can just about glide them up, probably. That's crazy. So the Hermes design would draw heavily upon the 1916 seaplane tender design that the British were already working with. However, it was at a much larger scale. You're talking like 3 or 4 times larger than a seaplane tender. Hold on, I have one more thing to add about the Hosho just from the Wikipedia page. Uh-huh. The ship provided valuable lessons and experience for the IJN in early air operations. Hosho's superstructure and other obstructions to the flight deck were removed in 1924 on the advice of experienced air crews. Like, can we not have shit on the runway? There's like a lot of, we'll get into some of that. Like, there's a lot of debate about how do you set up an aircraft carrier deck? Like, what is best? Why am I having to weave in and out of stuff as I'm trying to take off? So in her original drawings from 1917, Hermes is conceived as carrying both seaplanes and wheeled aircraft. She's a dual threat. And obviously, like we know, like carrying seaplanes isn't totally weird or anything at this time. Most battleships and a lot of the heavy cruisers and stuff have deployable seaplanes, but they're not really for offensive purposes. They're for spotting and recon. This design is notable that she has like a built-in seaplane slipway that she's used to like launch and retrieve her seaplane. So not like they're not having to like use a crane to lower them down like the way a battleship would. They almost have like a little like ramp they can slide down and get into the water. It's kind of cool, but it never actually makes it past like the paper
So in
stage.
that sense, kind of more advanced than the ship we talked about in our most recent main episode, having to haul the lifeboat out from storage and physically huck it over the side.
Much better than that. In January 1918, an update was submitted to the design, and that would include the addition of a rotating bow catapult that would allow the vessel to launch aircraft regardless of wind direction. She's pretty state-of-the-art for the time she's being built here. Honestly, really experimental as much as anything. Later that month, construction would begin, although the shipyard that she's being built at lacks resources to move quickly. Part of this is due to the efforts to get the HMS Eagle in service as quickly as possible. It's another aircraft carrier, but she's being converted from a battleship hull. This hull was actually originally ordered by the Chilean Navy as a battleship, built in a British yard. And so with World War I still going on, they kind of commandeer this hull that's supposed to go to the Chilean Navy and say, thanks, we're going to repurpose that. It's one of the benefits of building stuff, I guess. One benefit from the slow pace of construction is that there's plenty of time to change her design. A lot of time for engineers to sit there and look at blue paper drawings. Some of these changes would include the elimination of the seaplane slipway that we mentioned above, and they would change her armament configuration around quite a bit. In this current iteration we're talking about, she would have 11 6-inch guns and a single anti-aircraft gun. Because remember, no one thinks airplanes can sink capital ships.
Planes are not dangerous.
No, not to big ships. What are you going to do? Drop a torpedo at it? There's still a big debate about what formation would be best for the deck, something we've kind of already talked about. The Admiralty actually tells the shipyard to not work on anything above the hangar deck without clearance from them, because they don't want to. There's so many different designs going on with where to put the island, which, like, the island on an aircraft carrier is the superstructure that you see, basically. There's one configuration where there's an island on the port and starboard side.
Why?
They go through a lot of different designs. It's finally decided that a single portside island would be used.
It's like one of the highway oases around Chicago where it just goes across the top.
Someone probably had it drawn out. But they would go with a single port island design at this point. And the vessel's armament would again change to 10 6-inch guns, but they would add 3 more to give them 4 anti-aircraft guns. So again, just playing with the configuration. Honestly, like, probably doesn't make a huge difference. They're not the Hermes is not intended to get into surface fights. So the Hermes would be launched in September of 1919. However, further construction was suspended. So she can float, but she's not complete. Some of this is due to flight testing that's going on a couple other carriers, the Eagle that we mentioned above, and the Argus. As a result of these tests, Hermes Island is moved to the starboard side and her forward catapult is removed. So if you think about most aircraft carriers, you see modern ones, that is where the island is. It's on the starboard side.
Right.
And it's really weird. I was reading some of this stuff last night, and then this morning, a completely different thing I saw this referenced. But tests show that pilots prefer to turn to port when aborting landings. And this holds true on an aircraft carrier or on like a surface runway. That pilots, most pilots will prefer to make a turn to port if they're going to abort.
Interesting.
So I don't know why that is, but like I found that very interesting.
must seem like more intuitive, maybe turning to most people's weak side. I don't know. That's interesting.
I guess to me, it's what I'm thinking in my head about it. I'm like, that feels right. That feels correct. I don't know if some of that is being like, I would be curious to know if a right-hand driving person would feel the same way, or if they would feel opposite. I'm wondering if some of that is being someone who learned to drive on the left-hand side of the car.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right in. Let us know.
Interesting that Argus and Hermes are on the same side here. Because I believe in the myth, Hermes kills the giant Argus Panoptes.
Only one thing can kill this Hermes, and it's in the Pacific.
Yeah, interesting that they've made up and they're working together. I think Hermes, if I remember correctly, I think Hermes kills Argus like on Zeus's orders, because Argus is like a servant of Hera, and that's just something you would do to one of your wife's servants.
That's like getting into like the next level Greek mythology.
The Hadith of the Greek myths.
The last revisions to her design were made in May of 1921. Her aircraft lifts are moved further apart and they're enlarged. This is to allow her aircraft wings to be spread when they're on the hangar deck. So just giving a little more room to operate with the planes as they're bringing them in and out from launching and stuff like that. And her armament would finally be reduced to 6 5.5-inch guns. So again, she's not really like, if she's using those, things are bad.
Maybe starting to game out if this is a situation where this is in such close quarters, like she should have other ships with
around
her that are dealing with that.
I think it's also like, say you have some unruly sailors in a Chinese port causing problems and you need to sail in and be like, hey, we can use these. Yeah, situation like that, maybe. So let's talk stats about her. 600 feet long. She has a beam of 70 feet 3 inches and a draft of 23 feet 3 inches. She's powered by 2 sets of Parsons steam turbines, which could achieve a speed of around 25 knots. The steam is provided by 6 Yarrow boilers, which operated at 235 psi.
Sounds good. That's a good psi number, I think.
You don't want that thing to go too high, you'll end up like a riverboat. The flight deck is 570 feet long, while her hangar deck was 470 feet. In total, give or take, she would carry around 20 aircraft. Some of that depends on which aircraft she's carrying. The ship's crew would total 33 officers and 533 enlisted men. However, that's not including the people attached to the air group that would be with them. So,
like the pilots? The
pilots, basically. So you could definitely, there's going to be a few more people than that on board, but nothing crazy. In 1920, the shipyard that the Hermes is being constructed in ends up closing. She's towed to Devonport, where she would be completed. Obviously, post World War I, probably a little bit less of a demand for some of these shipyards, so they can start closing down some of the ones that are less efficient and things like that. In February of 1923, Captain Arthur Stopford is assigned as the Hermes' first commanding officer. He would see her through her sea trials, and she would be officially commissioned February 19th, 1924, where she would be assigned to the Atlantic Fleet. I'm going to spend more time researching Arthur Stopford, but I'm pretty sure that he is the Stopford that is mentioned in the song Bay of Suvla by the Dreadnoughts.
Yes.
And I believe he was a dreadnought man himself at the end of the day. Like, he was supposed to, he believed in the ability to shell the Turks and all that into submission.
I'm assuming if he's mentioned that song, it's probably not praise.
It's definitely, I think it's in the first half of the album, so some of it is, how would you say, ignorant optimism.
If only because, the Suvla landings didn't go well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of mentioned as, he's going to be the one that's prepared it for us, and it'll be easy, and it wasn't.
He's best remembered for commanding the landing at Suvla in August 1915, where he failed to order an aggressive exploitation of the initially successful landings. So, Probably
There you
not
go.
good.
No, not good. His reward for this, here's an aircraft carrier.
Failing up. Tried and true strategy.
It worked out for Churchill in World War One.
I saw someone post the other day, it's like Netanyahu is today's Churchill. That is true, but not in the way that you mean it.
We just finished Peaky Blinders, and then there's some Churchill scenes in there, and the one where he tells Tommy that he fought in World War One just like him. I was like, no, you didn't. Not like that. Not in a tunnel.
Yeah, no.
It was different for you.
That reminds me of in The Wind That Shakes the Barley, when they're interrogating Cillian Murphy's character. There's our connection to Tommy Shelby. And the British officer, like the intelligence officer's like crying like about all of the British soldiers that they've killed. He's like, these men fought at the Somme. It is kind of funny because it's like, well, whose fault is that?
Right. Right.
I didn't make them do that.
So now under the command of Stopford, she would conduct flying trials with Fairey 3D reconnaissance biplanes. This is mostly just to make sure she's operating correctly, basically. This is all still kind of experimental.
Ferries, yeah, I bet they are biplanes.
She would participate in a fleet review by King George V on July 26 in Spithead.
Actually, I've got... I just finished reading a book about mutiny, just the history of mutiny.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very famous Spithead mutiny that we might talk about at some point.
That'd be cool. I don't know anything about that. So after this review at Spithead, she would undergo retrofitting until November, when she would be assigned to the Mediterranean fleet and sail to Malta. So this is like one of their new shiny toys. Of course, they want to show it off, and then you send it off to go do Empire things, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the time of her deployment to Malta, the vessel is equipped with Fairey Flycatcher fighters. Fairey is a manufacturer of aircraft.
That's something that Arlie Ermy would yell.
Hermes would then make her way for the China station on June 17th, 1925. I really forgot how much the British were getting up to in China in this time period. They're very busy.
Yeah, I just recently read Diana Preston's book on the Boxer Rebellion. Obviously, that's a couple decades before this, but Britain still obviously has a huge presence in China.
Mm-hmm. During this lengthy trip to China, she would stop in the Mediterranean. And there, Captain Stopford would be replaced by Captain C.P. Talbot. And I don't think we're going to go through. There's a bunch of different captains, and I don't think it's so much as like anyone do anything wrong. I think they just like to rotate captains through to have this command experience. Basically,
everyone gets a turn on the carrier.
Yeah, they're also spending like a year at sea in China at a time and stuff like that. She would arrive in Hong Kong on August 10th, 1925. Hermes would then return to the Mediterranean early 1926, where she was retrofitted from April to June. A lot of this interwar time is back and forth between the Pacific via the Mediterranean, doing refits, things like that. It's, we've talked about before, there's a lot of changing technology in this time period. Also, like, there's just constant maintenance that needs to be done on these vessels. Like you said, these early aircraft carriers all kind of look like shit.
It's like one long shakedown cruise.
Late January of 1930 found the Hermes transporting the British minister to China, Sir Miles Lampson, to Nanjing for talks with the Chinese government over the Japanese invasion of Manchuria.
Should probably do something about that.
Yeah, we're starting to see some rumblings of the future here. During her time there, she would sail downriver to Shanghai on March 2nd, but by the end of the month, she would return to Hong Kong. So she's staying pretty active and busy. Like, she's not just anchoring in port somewhere. They're like actively using her to travel and visit different places around China. She would remain in Hong Kong until June, when she would make her annual visit to Weihaiwei for the summer. She briefly visited Hong Kong again before setting out for Great Britain in early August. She'd reach Portsmouth on September 23rd, However, 6 days later, she would be moved to Sheerness. I think it's interesting, like seeing like how, you leave in early August, you don't get home until late September, like 2 months at sea, basically. It was at this point that Captain J.D. Campbell is relieved by E.J.G. McKinnon on October 2nd. The vessels are then given a quick refit at Chatham Dockyard before returning to China Station. For this trip... Sorry, Rooney yawned really loud. It was funny. For this trip, in addition to her regular complement of aircraft, she would carry 6 Blackburn Ripons to be delivered to Malta en route.
Blackburn Ripon. So another biplane, it looks like.
Yeah, we're still firmly in biplane territory here. Hermes would depart on November 12th. Go ahead.
The Ripon was also produced overseas in Finland. Many of the Ripons in service with the Finnish Air Force saw extensive use in both the Winter War and the Continuation War. This looks like a Sopwith Camel. That's crazy that they're fighting, against the Soviets in Finland.
Hermes would depart Great Britain on November 12th and reach Hong Kong on January 2nd, 1931. On January 9th, while en route to her typical summertime visit to Weihawei, the ship received reports that the submarine Poseidon had been sunk while in exercises in the area. And I had never heard of this story, but I think I kind of want to do more research on this to see what
she
happened.
Sank or she had been sunk by something?
That's sort of, I think, where the story might lie. Captain McKinnon would take charge of the rescue efforts when Hermes arrived on scene. In total, 8 of the submarine's crew had managed to escape through a forward torpedo hatch, although only 6 of these men would make their way to the surface. Those that were picked up, and those 6 men were picked up by the Hermes. They're treated on board in the vessel's sickbay. However, 2 of those survivors would die. So in total, I believe there's only 4 survivors from that one. It's interesting, like these stories like this, like sailing back and forth this many times, like you just kind of know you're bound to be wrapped up in some of that kind of stuff. Hermes would remain in Weihawei until late August, when she would sail up the Yangtze River to Hankou, an island port. On September 5th, she would dispatch armed sailors to put down unrest on several British merchant ships in port. This is where like those little, those 5.5-inch guns might come in handy, right? It's like, hey, don't hijack the ship, please. Her primary focus, however, on this trip is actually to survey flooding that had impacted the area and to assist the Chinese government in mapping it so that they can try to combat it. Someone else of note happens to be in the area doing the same thing, Mr. Charles Lindbergh and his wife. They're actually working in the same area providing flooding information. Must have taken some time off from the American Nazi stuff.
Yeah, right about this time, Lindbergh, he's probably excited about some of the stuff happening in the world.
Yeah, Oswald Mosley plays a really big role in like the later seasons of Peaky Blinders, and all I can think is like, I bet they were friends, Lindbergh and Mosley.
Yeah, probably. I guess I don't know much about Lindbergh in terms of like how American chauvinist he was. Would he have?
That's
not
true.
liked
He might have
British
been
people?
more of like I could see him kind of like looking down on British people.
Yeah, like obviously he was a Nazi, but
Right. But he's our Nazi.
I don't know that he was an internationalist as well. I don't know enough about him. I mean, I think I know enough about. I don't really want to.
Yeah, I don't have a desire to learn more. The couple were offered the use of the Hermes as a base. However, this plan would be flipped upside down when their airplane was flipped upside down in the water on October 2nd.
See, if Lindbergh had just died there, he'd probably be more fondly remembered overall.
It is funny how we talk about him like flying across the Atlantic and then nothing else. Like that's it.
That's really all you learned about him in school. But yeah, it's like if he had just died there, he would be like a beloved aviation pioneer.
Trying to help the Chinese.
Read too deeply into his actual private beliefs. It's like Richard Dawkins. If Richard Dawkins had died before the invention of Twitter,
Right.
We would know him primarily as like an astute thinker and evolutionary biologist. And now we know him as like a creepy racist Islamophobe.
The Lindbergh's aircraft is quickly hoisted aboard the Hermes, and the couple is rescued by boat, one of the lifeboats from the Hermes. At that point, Captain McKinnon offers to take them to Shanghai, where they can get their plane repaired. So they actually spend a day or two on the Hermes. She would remain in Shanghai until November 2nd, when she would make her way back to Hong Kong. While making this journey on November 3rd, she received a distress call from the SS Raijin Maru, which had run aground on the Tan Rocks near the Chinese mainland at the mouth of the Taiwan Strait. She would rescue 9 of the crew before being relieved by a Japanese destroyer. I think it's interesting, like in this time period with all this like rising tension, like, you know, the British are helping the Chinese, Japan's doing what they're doing, but there's a lot of like, you know, there's this Japanese destroyer responds to this scene quickly. There's a lot of potential for bad things to happen, I feel like, with this much mixing of weapons, basically.
The races.
Mr. Mosley, is that you? Mr. Lindbergh?
They're rubbing off on me here.
August 15th, 1934, found the Hermes with a new captain. The Honorable G. Fraser took command, and she would begin sea trials testing some of her new equipment. At this time, 9 Fairey Seal torpedo bombers joined the ship. Nothing? You got nothing to say about the Seal?
I couldn't remember what that lady's name is. Marie Glusenkamp Perez is who I was trying to think of. I couldn't get it out fast enough. We had a big leopard seal in our earlier episode today also.
So Hermes would leave Portsmouth on November 18th and arrive in Hong Kong on January 4th, 1935. As you can tell, we're just slowly ticking down the calendar here to get to the events section. It's a looming storm, if you will. In late January, the Hermes was involved in an incident that actually involved pirates.
Pirates?
Yeah, pirates. They captured I don't know the details into this. I'm just reporting what I read. I do want to look into it more. The pirates had captured a British merchant vessel, the SS Tung Chau, and this vessel had 90 American and British children on board. I'm not sure why. That's what I really want to know why there's so many children.
Let's circle back to the children. What's going on here?
Hermes was, like, it could have been like evacuating maybe like children from somewhere over there or something.
I see this New York Times headline says planes chase pirates from ship with 70 children, some Americans. British naval craft rout Chinese who held vessel 3 days. 1 guard slain, passengers robbed by attackers. The Tung Chau reaches Hong Kong, 1,350 miles from destination. Pirates routed, 70 children saved. Routed is such a fun way to describe the pirates. It's like they're not a military, so it's like bragging about we routed these guys is very fun.
Well, the version I've read, it says that the Hermes deployed her aircraft in search of the vessel, and 3 of her SEAL bombers were actually able to locate it in Bias Bay on February 1st. Upon realizing they had been found, the pirates abandoned the vessel and left the passengers behind unharmed. Pirates don't want to fight.
Yeah, that's not part of what you sign up for.
Hermes would remain in the area around Hong Kong until the middle of May, when she would make way to Huawei. On September 12th, 1935, she was moved to Singapore, and that's so she can be closer to East Africa. What's going on in East Africa, you might ask? Do you have any idea?
Mussolini is rebuilding the Roman Empire.
He is. Mussolini is invading Ethiopia.
Rebuilding and even in some ways expanding the Roman Empire.
Yeah, he's making it bigger.
Who would have thought, with all of the capable administrators that, you know, and generals that Rome had, that they were just waiting for Benito Mussolini to come and show them how it's done.
In November, the Hermes aircraft were used to search for a missing aircraft, piloted by Sir Charles Kingsford Smith. The aircraft is actually called Lady Southern Cross. Kind of like Lindbergh flew the Spirit of St. Louis. Smith was attempting to set a speed record between Britain and Australia. I kind of miss the days of like that being a thing.
You could just pick two places and be like, I'm going to be the fastest person to go between these two.
The search would last nearly a month. However, no trace of pilot or plane could be found. Hermes would then return to Hong Kong in early March of 1936.
So he didn't get the record.
Didn't get the record. Did not. He won the Amelia Earhart Award. Also probably captured by the Japanese. So the Hermes would be joined by destroyers Duncan and Delight in April.
Today it would be a headline like, are the Japanese training coconut crabs to capture downed American pilots?
Hermes would be joined by the destroyers Duncan and Delight in April, and this was for a tour of Japan. Found that like it's a very late tour of Japan.
I don't know about a destroyer called Delight.
I do love that Great Britain warship names are either whimsical or like, we will grind you into dust.
There's a spectrum between like HMS Insurmountable and HMS Puffin.
This group would also do a tour of what would soon become part of Japan, the Dutch East Indies. The ship's torpedo bombers would also use this time to make practice runs at the destroyer Dorsetshire. Can't remember if she was a destroyer or a cruiser. She might have been a cruiser. They also worked with RAF torpedo bombers based at RAF Seletar in Singapore. So, you know, what's the beauty of having all these overseas possessions is you kind of have like permanent aircraft carriers places. Hermes would then leave Singapore on March 17th and would reach Plymouth on May 3rd, 1937.
You mentioned that about the overseas possessions. That's actually interesting in how that changed. I read a bit about this. Germany's naval strategy from one world war to the next. Because after World War I, they lose, their Pacific possessions, their Asian possessions, and they don't have this system of fueling stations like the British, like the Americans have. And so it does sort of force the German Navy to not use any of the same strategies on a global scale that they were able to try in World War I.
Yeah, that is interesting. Now that she's back in Great Britain, Hermes would take part in the Coronation Fleet Review at Spithead on May 20th, 1937 for King George VI. Following this event, the vessel was assigned to the Reserve Fleet. And on the 16th of July, 1938, she became a training ship at Devonport. So she kind of began her career with one of these fleet reviews in front of King George V. And one of our last things before going into the Reserve Fleet is a fleet review in front of King George VI. But what happens? World War II happens.
Mm-hmm.
At the dawn of World War II, obviously, Great Britain is pretty much willing to use anything that they have because resources are limited. And the vessel is given a brief refit in early August 1939. And Captain F.E.P. Hutton is given command on August 23rd. The next day, she's officially recommissioned, and 12 Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers are assigned to her.
Do you know what the FEP stands for?
I don't. I just assumed you said FEP.
It stands for... The F is for Fitzroy.
Oh, my.
The E is for what's probably pronounced Evelyn, like Evelyn Waugh. You could say it Evelyn, though, which would be funnier. Fitzroy Evelyn Patrick Hutton. Or FEP. Yes, I guess you could just go with that.
I like FEP.
Old Captain Fap Hutton over here.
Hermes is first tasked with anti-submarine patrols in the western approaches. On September 18th, 1938, Hermes actually locates a submarine, but the attacks by her escort destroyers ISIS and is it Imogen?
It might just be pronounced Imogene.
Yeah, I guess so, right? That's a name, apparently.
Yeah, it's definitely a name.
I did not know that.
I think that's how it's usually spelled.
Imogene?
I guess I would pronounce it Imogene naturally. Is it doesn't look like that should be the pronunciation because it doesn't end in an E. But I know a lot of Imogenes that do spell it that way. Like, isn't Imogene Heap, like the musician?
That's who popped up when I Googled the name.
Yeah. It is one of the weirder name spellings.
But attacks by her escort destroyers Isis and Imogene did not find any success.
I think it is probably pronounced Isis from the goddess, even though like that name has lost some cachet in the meantime since this was named.
Yeah, I feel like that is...
It's like the band ISIS that always has to identify themselves as ISIS, the band.
It does suck that they kind of ruined that one for everybody. This action is actually taking place kind of... It's always interesting when you get a little context to what's going on. This is actually taking place one day after the carrier Courageous was sunk on a similar patrol. So I'm sure there's a little heightened sense of things going into this. And, you know, being very aware that there are submarines out there. Following this patrol, Hermes is ordered back to Devonport, where she's fitted with degaussing gear. On October 7th, Hermes met up with the French battleship Strasbourg before arriving together in Dakar, French West Africa. From there, they would begin searching for German vessels on October 25th. These patrols are pretty uneventful, and she would escort a convoy to Britain at the end of that December. She'd be refitted in Great Britain from January 9th to February 10th, 1940. And after this, she would return to Dakar and patrol for German commerce raiders. I think that's one of the interesting parts of early World War II is a lot of that, like all the stuff that's going on in the Pacific and Indian Ocean and the commerce raiding that's happening. Like truly like the world part of the war.
And you still have things like German surface raiders are able to operate still.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A new captain, Captain F.J. Onslow, took command on May 26th. Hermes would continue to make these patrols with no results. However, after a routine patrol on June 29th, the vessel was ordered to leave harbor only 9 hours after her arrival. This would begin the blockade of Dakar, as the government of French Senegal had declared the colony's allegiance to Vichy France. During the early morning of July 8th, a boat launched from Hermes attempted to drop 4 depth charges under the battleship Richelieu's stern. These are the fun little attacks and like strange things that I think are so interesting.
Yeah, like I couldn't have told you that there was naval combat off of Dakar in World War II.
This is done in coordination with a torpedo attack from the Swordfish bombers that are on board Hermes. The depth charges would fail to detonate. However, one torpedo struck the battleship and damaged her propellers. The French would deploy aircraft to counterattack. However, they did not score any hits. So yeah, it's like a fun little skirmish that happens in Dakar, which I know, never knew that existed.
Really any of the, I mean, I guess, yeah, with all the French overseas possessions, I imagine there are little bits of resistance where like the ones that do stay, quote unquote, loyal to the Vichy government. I know there is fighting that happens there. Like I know when the landings in North Africa happen, I know some of those are going up against what's like Vichy French emplacements, but yeah, it's definitely not a part of the war that I know a lot about.
On July 10th, the Hermes was involved in a collision with the armed trawler HMS Corfu. During a heavy rainstorm, the Hermes struck the small armed trawler. The impact would injure 3 of Hermes' crew, one of which would later die. However, no one on the smaller vessel is actually injured. But it usually doesn't work that way, I don't feel like.
Yeah, that's kind of the opposite of how it normally works.
The vessels were locked together after this collision, and the Corfu's crew is literally able to walk on board the Hermes. They were pulled apart by a combination of the Hermes turbines at full speed astern and blowing the ballast tanks of the Corfu in order to lighten the forward section of her ship. Hermes had damage to the forward 30 feet of her bow. Fortunately for them, most of this damage is above the waterline. After this collision, she would proceed to Freetown with the Corfu in tow, arriving there 3 days later. From there, she would join a convoy to South Africa on August 5th and would be repaired in Symonds town. I'm assuming some of these places have like changed names and stuff. I don't know.
I know Freetown is still called Freetown because that's the capital of Sierra Leone.
Repairs were completed on November 2nd, and the ship will be back in Freetown on November 29th. In early December, the carrier is joined by the light cruiser Dragon.
Now that's a ship name. That's a warship name.
That's a warship name. They would search for German commerce raiders in the South Atlantic while operating out of St. Helena. The duo was joined by armed merchant cruiser Pretoria Castle to search for the pocket battleship Admiral Scheer, although they had no success in finding her.
A pocket battleship is just a small battleship, like a light battleship.
So, yeah.
Little baby.
The group returned to Freetown on December 31st, and Hermes was redeployed to the South African coast to search for Vichy blockade runners. A lot of time searching for these things, and they sure don't find much. February 4th, 1941, the Hermes is joined by heavy cruisers HMS Shropshire and Hawkins to blockade the Somali port of Kismayo, which was under siege by British forces. Hawkins would capture 3 Italian merchant vessels, and Hermes was also able to snag one. So for the first time, she's finally getting some results. On February 2nd, she was ordered to search again for the Admiral Scheer, after the Scheer was spotted by British aircraft. The battleship was able to successfully break contact, and really no further traces of her were found. So again, a little blip on the radar. Hermes arrived in Colombo, Ceylon on March 4th and would continue the search unsuccessfully. She was then sent to the Persian Gulf to support British operations around Basra, Iraq, where she would remain until the middle of June. She then moved to patrolling the Indian Ocean between Ceylon and the Seychelles. So you can see there's a lot of movement going on here early in the war, trying to plug different holes and things like that. These patrols would last until November 19th, when she would arrive in Smithtown for refitting. This refit would be completed on January 31st, 1942, and the Hermes was then assigned to the Eastern Fleet. She would arrive in Colombo on Valentine's Day, 1942. She would set out on February 19th to receive a squadron of Swordfish bombers and to link up with the HMAS Vampire, an Australian destroyer. This pair would conduct anti-submarine operations.
Absolutely love the Vampire. And I believe the Vampire was... Is this the same Vampire, or is this a different Vampire? This must be a different Vampire.
That what?
Because there was a Australian destroyer Vampire that was in the same class as the Voyager.
I think that's a later.
Yeah,
Vampire.
that can't be the same one.
This is
still a cool name.
This is the Vampire before that, I believe. After a few of these anti-submarine operations, the vessels are ordered to Fremantle, Australia in mid-March to join the Allied forces there. However, 3 days after this order was given, it was rescinded, and the vessels were attached to Force B of the Eastern Fleet. On April 5th, the Japanese would raid Colombo using aircraft carriers to launch the attacks. Hermes and Vampire were sent to Trincomalee to prepare for Operation Ironclad, the invasion of Madagascar. Again, something I know nothing about.
I guess I didn't know that there was actual military operations in Madagascar.
As part of this, her squadron of torpedo bombers is sent ashore. On April 9th, 1942, Hermes received an advance warning of a Japanese raid. They left Trincomalee, sailing south along the Ceylon coast, escaping before the Japanese arrived. Unfortunately for the Hermes, she was spotted by a Japanese recon plane off of Batacaloa. The British intercepted this report from the recon aircraft and ordered the ships to return to Trincomalee. They also attempted to provide what air cover they could. I think it's interesting that we were just reading Japanese communications throughout the war, American and British, were very easily able to decode and track Japanese communications.
Thanks in part to the topic of one of our bonus series. I think this was 2 parts. Elizabeth Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
I forget if we did that in 1 or 2 parts, but we did some bonus stuff about the cryptanalyst Elizabeth Friedman and her husband, who both worked on code breaking stuff during the war.
The Japanese would launch 85 D-3A dive bombers, escorted by 9 Mitsubishi Zeros. They're tasked with one thing: attacking the Hermes and Vampire.
The D-3As, those are VALs, correct?
Are they? I can't remember.
The Aichi D-3A?
Yes, Val. It is a Val. You're correct. You watch a lot of Black Sheep Squadron?
No, I read the Ian Toll trilogy. I mean, I did see a lot of Black Sheep Squadron, but I don't remember a lot of the details.
Those are Val bombers. The results of this attack are quick and decisive. Think about what 85 dive bombers coming at you looks like.
Yeah, I mean, especially on one of these carriers that don't look great to begin with.
And actually, only 32 of the dive bombers were able to locate the Hermes and Vampire as targets.
This still does not sound great.
No, 32 is still about 32 too many. Both the Hermes and Vampire are hit multiple times. They really never have a chance, actually. Despite these overwhelming odds, however, 6 Ferry Fulmer fighters attempted to fend off some of the bombers. They were on scene as the attack unfolded. 6 more of these Fulmer fighters would arrive on the scene minutes later, but they reported the Hermes as already sunk by the time they were on scene.
I would think also this early in the war, there's no way that these fighters are anything close to the Zero in terms of...
I would not... Yeah, is that still a biplane?
In terms of dogfighting capacity.
No, it is a monowing aircraft at least, but yeah, it's definitely not...
Because early in the war, it's there's really nothing that can really handle the Zero, even if it were a fair fight numerically. So yeah, I can't imagine that was a fun task to be assigned.
No, I can't imagine. So the Japanese aircraft that did not attack the Vampire and Hermes worked their way north. They would sink the RFA Ethelstone, the HMS Hollyhock, and the oil tanker SS British Sergeant. So it was a pretty good day for Japanese aviation.
Yep, things are probably only going to keep getting better from there. If you're a Japanese pilot, you're probably going to have a successful war and retire at home.
The sun is rising.
And famously, it keeps going that way.
Hermes would sink quickly, taking 307 of her men with her. Captain Onslow is actually one of them. The captain does go down with the ship. And Vampire's captain, along with 7 of her men, are also killed. Most of those that survived the initial attack are rescued by the hospital ship Vita. So if you could get out, you had a decent chance at survival, but obviously, with it sinking that quickly, a lot of people never had the chance to even escape. In total, the Japanese lost 4 dive bombers, while the British lost 2 of their fighters.
It's really surprising that only 2 of those fighters were shot down.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's because of there only being 8 zeros, and honestly, splitting up your zeros is the only way you're going to lose some of them.
There's not as many zeros as I thought, I guess.
Yeah, it's mostly the vowels. And with that...
that's a tough one. Credit to the Imperial Japanese Navy on this one. I mean, what do you say here besides scoreboard? I mean...
Yeah, that is the story of the Hermes. She goes down. However, what if I told you there's a fake? There's a lot of fake Hermes, I believe is the fashion label bags that's spelled the same way out there. There's also a fake Hermes aircraft carrier.
Oh, I guess I have seen this brand before. Hermes. Hermes. I don't know.
I think it leans to the expensive side.
Hormuz.
That's what you buy off of Temu. So they actually create a fake Hermes at one point, because we did a lot of this in World War II. I feel like they love to create fake armies. The merchant steamer SS Mamari III, formerly the SS Zealand, is converted to resemble the Hermes. She's not functional. She doesn't really work, but it's just mostly for photography purposes, like aerial recon purposes, to make the Germans think they have more aircraft carriers than they do.
So, like, I assume, are you also putting out like fake radio chatter?
I would imagine. I mean, that's, it's kind of like what Patton's army was doing. Patton's, pre like June 6th. So I imagine it's just part of that whole thing, but it is kind of funny that they created a fake aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I like that.
It's kind of funny because it also gets sunk.
Oh, so not really, doesn't really do much, I guess. But
on June 4th, 1941, the fake aircraft carrier is steaming down the east coast of England en route to Chatham Dockyard in Kent. She's actually going to be converted back into a cargo ship because that's what the UK needs now, because the U-boats keep sinking them.
We don't need any fake aircraft carriers. We need real cargo ships now.
However, she would hit a submerged wreck off of Norfolk while under attack from German aircraft. Before she could be refloated, the carrier was finished off by German E-boats, where she would be written off as a total loss.
Now, if I'm that German E-boat captain, I'm claiming the sinking of a carrier.
Absolutely.
Here.
That thing was a fully functional aircraft carrier.
Because I think that's what it was when I was sinking it. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So I found that kind of funny that there was like a fake one also.
That is very funny. And both of them sink, which is also
yes, and they're by different opponents too.
Yeah, they both get a shot in.
Kind of funny that the Hermes ends up fighting the Germans, French, Italians, and Japanese.
That is, probably very few ships, I guess, would be able to claim that.
Yeah, she got them all. So yeah, that is the story of the Hermes. I thought it was pretty interesting. It's kind of one of those quirky ones that, can happen in this time period. But
yeah, I really like that one because that's a part of the naval war this touched on several parts of the naval war that I didn't know really anything about.
Yeah, it's given me some more stuff to look into, and I want to research some more. So definitely a fun one.
Cool.
I think with that, we'll wrap this one up. Check out the Patreon stuff that we got going on.
Yeah, I have like 9 hours of show stuff to edit. So there should be like a cascade of stuff coming out in the near future here.
So much content.
Although this will be like the last of them. So like this will be the last. This won't really be that helpful to say at the end of the episode. But
well, I hope you guys have a great week and we will talk to you soon.